In this video, I will give you some strategies for writing a critical analysis of a TV show. A lot of students wonder how they can organize their ideas for this essay. You still need to have body paragraphs with their own controlling idea, right? Each body paragraph has to have a main idea, which is a sub-point of the thesis statement. So you might choose to organize your essay by character. Maybe you're focusing on just one or two episodes or even one season of the show. You could focus on different characters for different paragraphs. Remember, it's totally acceptable. In fact, I encourage you to zoom in for essay 3 and then zoom out a little bit for the research paper. So writing about a single episode of the show could actually be really effective and help you stay focused and narrow and really specific when you're writing the essay. So you could organize your paragraphs according to character, or you could organize your paragraphs according to scene. Use chronological order or some other ordering device having to do with the scene, right? Maybe use emphatic order, save the most important or salient scene for the end of the essay. You could also do it by storyline. Maybe you're focusing on 3 different storylines between characters. The first part of your essay could be about the first storyline, the second part about the second storyline, and so on and so forth. Or you could just choose another subpoint that makes sense. I find that if you've written your essay, you've written an outline, then you've written a rough draft of the essay, and you can't articulate the sub-point of each body paragraph. In other words, you can't point to your third body paragraph and tell me in a couple words the main idea of that paragraph. That means that you probably don't have an organizing principle for your essay. So do make sure you're spending lots of time up front when you're in the outlining phase, thinking about how you're organizing your paragraphs. Remember that each body paragraph has its own controlling idea and at least one concrete specific example from the TV show. And I know it's difficult because in English classes we're used to writing about short stories or novels, so we would take a quote from the text. Well, we're using a lot of the same skills when we analyze television shows. So you could provide a quotation, what one of the characters says, right? There are writers, after all, who give the characters things to say. You could talk about set design, lighting, costume. You could even unpack body language in the scene. So you want to be as specific and detailed as possible, right? It's not enough to say something like, this female character is assertive, but she's called bossy in the scene. Instead, you'd want to give me a specific quotation. You'd want to talk about how the actors make that come to life, what they're wearing, if it's relevant to your point about how the other characters are treating this character. And of course, if it's relevant to your thesis, make those examples more specific. And when in doubt, provide a quotation from the characters, right? Dialogue is really important. And then somewhere in your essay, you incorporate your scholarly sources. So remember that not only are you quoting from the TV show itself or noticing other details from the TV show itself, but you're supporting your point with examples or evidence from scholarly sources, which I know can be confusing at first, but remember, if you cannot find a peer-reviewed scholarly source that's about your particular TV show, although many scholars, as we've mentioned before, write about television shows, but if you cannot find a scholarly article about your specific show, you might find an article about the issue your show is exploring or the genre of the show. So for example, students who are writing about a show like The Office, that's a dated example, but just a hypothetical example, they might find scholarly articles about the genre of the documentary mixed with the sitcom. They might find articles about how white-collar workers are depicted on television. They might find articles about what it means to be working in a paper company, something like that. So you can find articles that are similar to what the TV show is about. What counts as evidence? So when I say that each body paragraph needs to have concrete, specific evidence from the TV show, what do I mean? Well, like I said before, it could be a quote from the TV show itself, what a character says. Maybe there's a narrator in the TV show. And of course, you want to pay attention to subtext and tone. If a character says, I'm fine, well, the character could mean they're fine or they're not fine at all, right? There's subtext. Think about body language. Think about the context of the scene. So unpack. Even things like a pause can be really telling. A detailed description of setting of a particular scene if that's important. If you were writing about the show Game of Thrones, a really detailed description of the Capitol, I forget what the Capitol in that show is called, but that might be relevant to your thesis statement. If it's not relevant to your thesis statement, obviously you don't want to have a paragraph in which you describe the setting, but if it is relevant to your argument, then you could include it. It does not necessarily have to be dialogue or what the characters say to each other. A detailed description of the costumes or body language. Remember that when TV shows are made, people are paid to design costumes and design sets. A specific plot point. So remember, this is not a summary essay. You are not writing a report about what this TV show is about, right? We're going beyond summary. This is also not an evaluation essay in which you tell me whether or not it's a good show, if it's entertaining or if it's boring. Instead, you're writing a critical analysis of the show, right? You're trying to get at some sort of cultural message. What is the show really about? You're constructing a debatable argument about the TV show. But you might find that you have to explain just what happened in the show, maybe a plot point, what happened to a character in a specific scene. If you analyze that, that's not merely summary, then you're providing a plot point and then you're unpacking it and connecting it back to your thesis. Of course, a quotation from your scholarly source. You don't have to have a quote from a scholarly source in each paragraph. They can be spaced out throughout the essay wherever you think it helps. And remember, you can pick a scholarly source that's a naysayer. You can plant a naysayer. So your scholarly source might be a source that you are explaining and then disagreeing with. Remember to introduce and integrate and cite all your quotations. A quotation, even if it's a complete sentence, can never stand alone. That's called a dropped quote. You have to introduce it, insert the quote, use a parenthetical citation, and then of course you have to analyze the quotation, right? After all, this is an analytical essay. And then anything that you quote must end up in your works cited page. Let's look at a few sample thesis statements. You can read these on your own, and these will be posted on the page. But I want to talk about what these thesis statements have in common. These are thesis statements from a few semesters ago that earned passing scores. Now, that might not mean that the thesis got an A, but it means that it earned an A or a B. A C is also a passing score, but I didn't include any C-level thesis statements here. Remember that for a thesis statement to get a 5 or a 4 in the thesis statement category, so an A or a B in that category, it has to be debatable, it has to be analytical, and it has to tell how or why or so what. So I'm asking for a lot when it comes to your thesis statement. All of these are passing because they go beyond summarizing the show. They go beyond saying the show is a good show or a bad show, or saying the show has a positive impact or a negative impact. They unpack something going on in the show. They're getting at the cultural message of the show. What is the show really about that a passive observer, a passive watcher of the show might not get, might miss? So all of these do that. They're all analytical, and you might notice that many of these thesis statements begin with clauses like although, and the first one begins with an although clause, the second one has a because clause, and the last one has an although clause. That's because if you include a counter argument or if you plant a naysayer within your thesis, that helps ensure that your thesis is actually debatable. Meaning a reasonable person who has also watched your television show might say, no, wait a minute, I don't think the show is actually saying that. Remember, you want to construct an interesting, debatable, sophisticated argument about your TV show. Let's take a look at this one right here in the middle. Whoops. In The Office, a post-9/11, middle of the 2008 financial crisis docucom, Michael Scott is more than just a character. He is a symbol for an American dream that is becoming increasingly hard to navigate. Stuck between America past, present, and future, his attempts to conquer corporate America, find love, and form enduring friendships with coworkers provides viewers with a blueprint for the life of the modern worker. So I've seen many episodes of The Office, but this is not something that would occur to me when I'm watching the show passively. I also think a reasonable viewer of the show might disagree that Michael Scott is not a symbol of the American dream that's becoming unattainable or difficult to navigate. He's not a blueprint for the life of the modern worker. He represents just a doofus or something different. So it's debatable, it's analytical. It happens to be long, but that's not what makes it an A-level thesis statement. What makes it an A-level thesis statement is that it's going beyond the obvious, it's clear, it's debatable, and I think it's insightful. I think it can be even more helpful sometimes to see examples of non-passing thesis statements. Now, when you write a draft, probably your tentative thesis statement is going to be really rough. So if your thesis statement right now looks like this thesis statement, don't panic, right? Tentative thesis statements are not meant to be perfect yet. They're tentative. But these thesis statements were examples that did not earn passing score. So they were in the D range. So Grey's Anatomy teaches us what happens in surgeries, how doctors work, and what all things happen inside surgery rooms. Aside from just the confusing wording and the vague wording at the end of that, that's just summarizing the show. I've never even seen the TV show, but just from watching a commercial with Grey's Anatomy referenced, I know that that's what Grey's Anatomy is about. So that's just summarizing what the show is about on the surface, right? Not unpacking what the show is really about or the hidden cultural messages. So your thesis cannot be something really obvious. Dexter is a violent television show that turns its viewers violent. That's an interesting thesis, but you need to go beyond just saying because the show depicts violence, it makes viewers violent. You have to connect those dots, right? You have to connect those dots within your essay, but also within the thesis. In the same way that you can't just say this show has lots of sexuality, so it makes teenagers oversexed or something like that. You need to connect the dots. And then of course, within the essay itself, you would need to support that with lots of data, which might be difficult to do because it's very difficult to prove that a single TV show has increased murder rates, right? That might be difficult to do. Even though it's a cartoon and seems like it should be for children, Family Guy is not a show that's appropriate for young children because it depicts bad morals. So I like that this thesis begins with an even though clause. The problem is I don't think any reasonable person who's awake and watching Family Guy would think it's a show for children, right? It's not meant to be a show for children. It's not marketed, I don't think, as a show for children. So it's saying something that most people would say, yeah, it's animated, but it's not a kids' TV show. So it's obvious. Game of Thrones has a positive impact on viewers. It doesn't say why it has a positive impact on viewers. And positive impact, that's really general, right? That phrase is mentioned in the prompt, but you need to narrow down your argument. So positive impact is really general. I could take this thesis statement and sub in any TV show and say the same thing, right? Seinfeld has a positive impact on its viewers, or Insecure has a positive impact on its viewers. If I could take your thesis and just take out a couple of keywords and plug it into anyone else's essay and it would still make sense, that's not a specific and debatable thesis statement. The Crown is an entertaining show with lots of historical figures. I've only seen one episode of the show, and I know this to be true. It's entertaining, and there are historical figures. You need to go beyond saying whether or not the show is entertaining or exciting, right? We're not evaluating the show in that way. And also saying that it has historical figures, right? Anyone who's seen even a preview for the show knows that that's the case. We are looking for interpretive arguments, some sort of sophisticated argument that a passive viewer is going to miss. So it requires that you watch the TV show, even just one episode with a pen and paper in hand, and think about what's going on. What does the show reveal about the zeitgeist? When you are citing a TV show inside your essay, so your in-text citations, you're introducing the show, remember that TV shows themselves should go in italics. So Friends would go in italics, just like long works like novels or plays go in italics. Specific episodes, though, within the TV show, those are considered short works, just like a short story or a poem, those go in quotation marks. So the one where Chandler can't cry, that's the name of an episode, a short work within the larger work, that goes in quotes. Friends, that's the name of the whole series, that goes in italics. And the way that you cite in your works cited page, not just your in-text citations, but in your works cited page, the way that you cite TV shows in the 2016 MLA update depends on whether or not you got the show from a streaming service. So please make sure you take a look here, or you can use Owl Purdue, the link which is on our homepage, to find out how to cite your show. Most of you, I'm imagining, probably accessed your show through a streaming service, so you would use this format. And of course, don't forget your hanging indent in your works cited page. And then finally, your works cited page will also include articles from the library database. Here is how you cite articles that come from a database like JSTOR or Project Muse. Remember, articles that come from databases, they come from the database that you access through the library website. The database itself should be in italics, in this case, ProQuest. But databases are just like giant containers of articles. Articles are generally published in journals. That journal should also be in italics, but the name of the specific article within the journal, within the database, will be in quotation marks. And of course, make sure you use alphabetical order in your works cited page.